The night the marsh began to hum, Cole Rayner thought it was thunder rolling in early, but his war dog, Echo, knew better. He sat rigid at the porch edge, eyes locked on the tide where the water shimmered like metal breathing. 30 minutes until the flood tide, and something beneath the bay was alive, turning, pulling. Cole followed the vibration through the fog, one cautious step at a time, until he saw the light's 3 green orbs rising from the black water in perfect formation. Then the hum spoke once, low and human, calling a name no one had used in years. Morning came in a smear of rust and gray over Gray Marsh Bay, the kind of light that didn't so much rise as hesitate. Mist clung to the cattails, curling around the stilt house where Cole Rayner crouched with a wrench and a stubborn length of pipe. Every turn squealed like a protest. Beneath him, the tide breathed through the pilings, slow, patient, endless. He'd been here 2 weeks and still didn't know if the place was trying to heal or bury him. The stilt house stood a mile off the main road, half swallowed by marsh grass and salt fog. Its wood was soft from years of storms, nails rusted black, but the foundation held. Most of the time, a solar battery flickered weakly in the corner. When it worked, it powered exactly 2 things, Mira's lamp and a tiny refrigerator that hummed like an asthmatic bee. Cole tightened the bolt until his knuckles went white, then sat back. The pump sputtered, coughed, and finally drew water. "There," he muttered. Echo thudded his tail twice on the warped deck, as if approving the fix. "Don't look at me like that," Cole said. "I'm retired from heroics." The dog tilted his head, unconvinced. Echo wasn't supposed to be alive either. Not after the blast that ended their unit's patrol in Helmand 5 years ago. The vets said he'd never run again, and the Army offered the usual condolences with paperwork attached. Cole signed the adoption forms anyway. They'd both been discharged, one with a limp, one with guilt that limped worse. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked toward the window. Mira was still asleep, her curls spread across the couch cushion like a tangle of copper thread. 8 years old, too light for her age. A quiet sort who didn't flinch at thunder but still cried when a bird hit the window. She'd been drawing late last night again. Her sketchbook lay open on the table, a page of blue lines curling through green, forming what looked like veins beneath water. Cole studied it for a moment. "You saw something, didn't you?" he whispered. Echo's ears twitched as though answering. The sound of gulls echoed across the flats, sharp, complaining, alive. It was a reminder that the world kept moving no matter who stayed behind. Cole poured a thin line of instant coffee into his mug, filled it with water that still smelled faintly of iron, and leaned against the doorway watching the bay shift colors. By mid-morning, the fog had thinned, revealing the marsh in its full, uneasy glory. Tides carved trenches between islands of cordgrass, each holding puddles the color of smoke. Dragonflies hovered in slow patrols. The air buzzed with life, but beneath it all, Cole felt that same subterranean hum from the night before, faint and irregular, like an engine idling somewhere underwater. He didn't mention it to Mira. She needed quiet more than questions. Their days followed a rhythm school lessons over weak internet, patching leaks, scavenging driftwood, keeping the generator alive just long enough to feel civilized. Nights were longer. The wind sounded different here, less like weather and more like breath. Sometimes Echo would lift his head suddenly and stare toward the horizon, muscles tight, eyes bright with an alertness that never left him even in sleep. Cole understood that look. Once a soldier learns to expect danger, he never really unlearns it. The war had been over for him a long time, but it still played through his hands the way he checked every latch twice, the way he scanned tree lines out of habit. He told himself the marsh was good medicine. Fresh air, solitude, distance from the city's noise and debt collectors. The property had come from his late father's brother, a man Cole barely remembered. The legal papers called it Parcel 47 Amperes of Gray Marsh Bay, deed uncontested. Translation: worthless land too swampy to build on. Cole saw it differently. Worthless land didn't attract buyers, which meant no one could take it from him or Mira. Freedom, of a sort. That afternoon, Cole walked the boardwalk that ran crookedly toward the waterline. Each plank creaked like a confession. Echo trotted ahead, testing the edges, pausing every few yards to sniff the air. The tide was out, revealing an expanse of slick mud flat-pocked with fiddler crab holes. Cole crouched at the end of the boards, fingers brushing the damp wood. He used to measure days and hours of watch, minutes to contact, seconds to react. Now it was by tides high for quiet, low for work. He stood and scanned the horizon. Beyond the marsh, the line of pines hid the mainland road and the few scattered houses of Briarneck Township. A single shrimp boat drifted in the distance, its mast leaning like a bent cross. He heard the crunch of gravel behind him. "Morning," called a voice. Cole turned. A man in a sun-bleached ball cap stood near the tree line, hands stuffed in his jacket. His beard was silver, face weathered. "Name's Guide Nash," he said. "Used to crab out here before the corporations fenced half of it off. You the new owner?" Cole nodded slowly. "Guess that's me. Thought nobody'd be fool enough to live out here." Cole offered a faint smile. "Guess I didn't get the memo." Guide laughed once, then spat into the mud. "Pump works yet?" "Barely. You'll want to check your filters after every storm. The silt'll choke 'em faster than gossip." He looked past Cole toward the flats. "You hear it yet? The humming?" Cole stiffened. "Last night. Thought so. Folks say it's pipes. Others say it's something breathing under the bay." Guide's grin didn't reach his eyes. "Me, I just don't fish near it anymore." He tipped his hat and started back toward the trees, boots leaving dark prints. "Watch the tides, soldier," he called over his shoulder. "They're not as predictable as you remember." Cole stood there a long while after he left, the wind tugging at his sleeve. Echo gave a low whine, impatient to move. "Yeah," Cole muttered. "Let's head back." The cabin, if one could call it that, was a patchwork of salvaged wood and sunburned paint. Inside, everything carried the smell of salt and kerosene. Mira had dragged her chair to the window again, sketchbook balanced on her knees. "What are you drawing now?" Cole asked, hanging his jacket on a hook. She smiled shyly. "The water looks different today." He peered over her shoulder. The page showed a shape rising beneath the surface, soft curves drawn in graphite, like a sleeping creature coiled under glass. "It's beautiful," he said, careful to keep his voice steady. "Do you think it's alive?" she asked. Cole hesitated. "Everything here's alive in its own way." Echo nosed her hand, accepting a scratch behind the ear before flopping down by the stove. Mira tapped the pencil against her lip. "You don't think it's scary?" He met her eyes. "Only if we stop paying attention." She nodded, as if that was enough. Later that evening, the clouds broke apart in streaks of violet and gold. Cole took his coffee to the porch. The tide crept back in, filling the creeks with whispers. Echo lay nearby, chin on his paws, eyes fixed on the horizon. The dog's scarred flank rose and fell with slow precision. Cole found comfort in that rhythm. They'd both been rebuilt out of broken parts. He thought about the letter from the bank still unopened on the counter. Disability pay covered almost nothing. Selling a portion of the land could buy them stability, maybe even a house closer to town where Mira could have friends again. But the thought of leaving this quiet patch unsettled him in ways he couldn't name. The hum returned briefly, faint but real, vibrating through the planks beneath his feet. Echo's ears twitched. Cole sipped his coffee without flinching this time. "Yeah, I hear it," he murmured. Maybe he was imagining things. Maybe not. The marsh had moods, same as men. Some nights, it whispered. Others, it held its tongue. By the second week, Cole learned the sounds of the place by heart. The tick of the lantern when fuel ran low, the groan of the wind under the floorboards, the soft murmur of Mira's dreams through thin walls. He'd never thought silence could have texture. Here, it did. Sometimes he woke before dawn and watched the light seep in over the flats, turning the mud silver. The mist smelled of iron and crushed shells. Echo would nudge his knee, tail thumping once, as if to say, "We're still here." He'd whisper, "Still here, partner," and believe it for a moment. The harbor master, a sharp-faced woman named Trudy Haskell, came by one morning in a skiff to check permits. She eyed Cole's weathered truck parked on the rise. "You got insurance on that place?" she asked, scribbling notes. "Enough to keep it standing," he said. She grunted. "Corporation's been sniffing around again. Some outfit called Axiom Terra, talking about eco-remediation projects. That's fancy for drilling. If they show up asking to buy, don't sign anything you don't read twice." "I appreciate the warning." She pushed off the dock, but her last words carried over the water. Marsh doesn't give back what it takes. Cole stood until her skiff disappeared into mist. The wind shifted, carrying the faint metallic taste again. He whispered to Echo, "Looks like we're not the only ones paying attention." That night, the storm rolled in hard. Rain drummed the tin roof. Mira slept in her loft, cocooned under blankets while Echo patrolled between windows. Cole sat by the stove, nursing the ache in his shoulder where shrapnel still nested deep. Every flash of lightning lit the marsh like a snapshot brief, eerie, perfect. and in one of those flashes, he saw movement near the far creek bend. A dark shape, upright, gone as soon as it appeared. He grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside. The rain stung his face. "Who's there?" Only wind answered. Echo growled low, deep in his chest. Then silence again, no footsteps, no splash, just the storm breathing. Cole lingered until the chill sank through his jacket, then went back inside. Mira stirred in her sleep, whispering something that sounded like, "Listen." He froze. "What did you say, baby?" But she was already dreaming again. The next morning brought a brittle calm. The marsh steamed under a pale Sunday branches littered the deck. A few shingles had blown loose. Cole repaired what he could, half distracted by the footprints he'd found near the end of the boardwalk. Heavy prints, wider than his, pointing toward the flats and vanishing where the tide had reclaimed them. He didn't mention those to Mira either. Instead, they spent the day gathering driftwood. She turned a few pieces into makeshift sculptures, birds, she said, to guard the house. Cole helped her tie them with string, hanging them from the porch beams. When the wind blew, they spun slowly, casting shadows that looked like wings. "You think they'll keep the bad things away?" she asked. He smiled. "Maybe they'll remind the good things to stay." Echo barked once, a short affirmative sound. Mira giggled. For the first time since moving here, Cole heard laughter that didn't feel borrowed from the past. That night, after Mira had gone to bed, Cole sat on the porch again. The moon hung low, staining the water pewter. The marsh was quiet, too quiet. Even the crickets had paused. Echo lifted his head suddenly. The hair along his spine bristled. "What now?" Cole whispered. The dog gave a single low bark and stared east, toward the darker mouth of the bay. Cole followed his gaze and saw it. A faint pulse of light under the surface, steady and rhythmic, as if the water itself were breathing. The hum returned, stronger this time, crawling up through the pilings into his boots. The coffee in his mug rippled. Echo moved closer to the edge, nose lifted. Cole's heart thudded in sync with that unseen rhythm. He didn't know if it was a machine, a current, or something older, but it was alive, and it was closer than last night. He looked back at the window where Mira's lamp glowed soft gold. Then he turned again toward the bay, jaw tightening. "Whatever you are," he murmured, "you picked the wrong house to whisper around." The water stayed still for a long moment. Then, just before the wind rose again, a single bubble surfaced at the pool's center wide, deliberate, like an exhale that had been waiting years to be heard. And the marsh went quiet once more. The next morning arrived colorless and heavy, the kind of gray that smothered the world before the rain. Cole Rayner crouched over the generator, trying to coax a spark from its corroded heart. The air smelled of ozone and brine. Echo paced a tight circle beside him, nose twitching, tail stiff, a bad tell. "Relax," Cole muttered, wiping sweat and rust from his palms. "It's just the weather." But the dog didn't relax. He froze mid-step, head cocked toward the marsh. A low rumble vibrated through the wet boards under Cole's boots, not thunder, something deeper, sustained. Echo whined once, a sharp sound that pulled Cole upright. The vibration grew, faint but rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried beneath the bay. He looked toward the waterline. The tide had receded earlier than usual, dragging long ribbons of muck into pale channels. Half a mile out, the flats shimmered faintly as if thin glass lay over them. And in the center of that shimmer, a faint mist curled upward, steady, pale, chemical. "Stay," Cole said automatically, though he already knew Echo wouldn't. The dog bounded off the porch, paws splashing through shallow puddles. "Damn it." Cole grabbed his jacket, slung the field kit over his shoulder and followed. By the time he reached the flats, the hum had grown into a constant undercurrent, pulsing through the soles of his boots. The air tasted wrong, sharp, and metallic, like battery acid diluted in rain. Echo led him across the slick mud, weaving through patches of cordgrass, until they reached the place where the mist coiled thickest. The ground sagged there. A wide pool, black as graphite, bubbled in slow bursts. Around its rim, a faint ring of pale crust shimmered in the weak light. It wasn't salt, it looked more like frost, or residue left by something burned away. Echo halted a few feet from the edge, and gave a soft chuff, nose working furiously. His ears flattened, then he sat back on his haunches, the same silent signal he'd given the night before. Cole knelt beside him, unzipped the kit, and pulled out a mason jar with a sealed lid. He dipped it into the pool, careful not to disturb the surface. The moment the glass touched, the water fizzed, releasing tiny bubbles that crawled up his wrist. He He lifted the jar and held it against the light. The liquid inside swirled with a faint opalescent sheen, not unlike oil but denser, alive somehow. "Where the hell?" he whispered. The hum deepened. Across the pool, the mud shifted. Something metallic jutted out a corroded pipe, almost invisible beneath moss and sediment. Its end was cleanly cut, as if sliced recently. "Echo," he breathed. "Find. The dog circled left, nose pressed low. He barked once, sharp, then again, each bark echoing off the flat water. Cole followed, scanning the horizon. Beyond the marsh grass stood a line of new tire ruts gouged into the earth, half filled with rainwater. Fresh. Too fresh for old hunters or crabbers. He crouched, pressed his fingers into the print, and felt the heat still rising from the soil. "Somebody's been here," he said. "Recently." Echo's growl rumbled low and steady. Cole stood slowly, scanning the horizon again. No vehicles, no figures, just that endless gray. He glanced back toward the stilt house, a small dot against the horizon, and felt the first edge of unease that wasn't just imagination. If someone was running equipment out here, they were doing it illegally. This land wasn't zoned for industry, but the tire tracks were wide, maybe for heavy rigs or transport. The thought of Mira sleeping alone at the house hit him like a cold nail. "Come on," he said, snapping his fingers. Back home. Halfway to the boardwalk, a skiff engine coughed to life somewhere beyond the tree line. He froze. It wasn't the usual outboard whine. This was lower, deeper, with the smooth rhythm of a tuned generator. The sound faded quickly, masked by the rising wind. Cole jogged the last 100 yards. Echo kept pace, glancing back every few seconds. The sky had darkened by the time they reached the porch. Inside, Mira sat cross-legged on the couch, pencil in hand. "Dad," she said softly. "I drew the sound." Cole blinked rainwater from his lashes. "You what?" She turned the sketchbook toward him. The page showed concentric circles, expanding from a central dark mass beneath the waves. Around the outer rings, she'd drawn small gray shapes like boats, maybe machines. In the center was a single black dot, surrounded by pale lines that looked like veins. "It hums," she said, "like when Mom's heartbeat monitor used to beep, but slower." "Owler." Cole felt his chest tighten. "You heard it?" She nodded. It was calling Echo's name. He stared at her for a long time, pulse thudding in his ears. He wanted to laugh, to tell her it was nothing but tide pressure or distant ships, but Echo had begun pacing again, nails ticking against the wood. "Okay," Cole said finally. "No more walks alone. Promise me." "Promise." That evening, after putting Mira to bed, Cole sat at the kitchen table with the jar of black water. Under the lamp, the liquid glimmered faintly, strands of silver drifting through it like slow smoke. He took a photo, then scribbled notes: metallic residue, temperature 50, 2 degrees Fahrenheit, unknown compound. His handwriting shook slightly. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just chemical runoff. There was movement inside, subtle but deliberate, like breathing through liquid lungs. He sealed the lid tight and shoved the jar into a crate. "We'll get it tested tomorrow," he told Echo. The dog didn't move from his post near the window. His ears flicked, catching sounds Cole couldn't hear. The drive to town the next morning was long and uneasy. The old truck rattled over potholes, tires hissing on wet gravel. Mira hummed softly in the passenger seat, tracing shapes in the fogged window. Echo sat in the back, gaze locked on the tree line sliding by. Briarneck's main street was little more than a gas station, a bait shop, and a diner that smelled like fry grease and cigarettes. Cole stopped at the small environmental testing lab tucked behind the feed store. A single technician, mid-50s, was hunched over a microscope. "Water sample," Cole said, setting the jar down. "From my property, Gray Marsh Bay." The man eyed the jar. "What for? Bacteria? Heavy metals?" "Just a survey," Cole lied. "Inherited the land. Want to know if it's safe to drill a well." "Sure thing." The tech unscrewed the lid, sniffed cautiously, then frowned. "That's a strange one. Metallic, almost sweet." He poured a bit into a test vial, holding it up to the light. "You say it's from the bay?" Cole nodded. The man scribbled something on his clipboard. "You'll have results in a week." "Appreciate it." He turned to leave, but the man added quietly, "If I were you, I'd keep my mouth shut till you see those numbers." Cole stopped. "Why's that?" "Because the last guy who brought me something that looked like this worked for Axiom Terra." Cole's breath caught. "And?" The tech's mouth twisted. "And he never came back for his results." Back at the stilt house, The air felt charged. The storm had broken, leaving a bright, cold sky, but the calm was deceptive. Echo refused to come inside, pacing the deck with ears up and tail low. Cole unpacked supplies, mind racing, Axiom Terra, the name the harbor master had warned about, environmental remediation, corporate-friendly green slogans, billions in lithium contracts overseas. If they were anywhere near Gray Marsh, they weren't looking to clean, they were looking to claim. He grabbed the folded deed from the drawer. The parcel's coordinates matched the area around the humming pool almost exactly. His land, he stared out at the marsh, jaw set. "So that's what you want," he muttered. "My worthless swamp." Echo barked once, sharp. Cole turned. The dog's gaze fixed on the waterline again. Out beyond the reeds, a glint of light blinked once, twice, like a mirror catching Sunday. He raised the binoculars. Through the haze, a shape floated in the distance. A barge, low-slung and matte green, half concealed by fog. No flags, no registration numbers. Just silent metal, anchored where no barge should be. Cole lowered the binoculars slowly. For the first time since Afghanistan, he felt that old, cold awareness crawl back into his bloodstream, the sense that something unseen had chosen him, and that running wasn't going to help. He looked down at Echo. "Guess we've been drafted again, huh?" The dog's tail thudded once. "All right," Cole said, picking up the rifle he swore he'd never use again. "Let's find out what the hell's breathing under my bay." The barge didn't behave like a boat. It behaved like a decision that kept moving. At flood, it drifted closer to the cannery skeleton. At ebb, it slid back toward the channel, always within reach of something unseen. Cole watched through the monocular while Echo dozed with one ear up, the way sentries pretend to rest. Mira's backpack still hung on the peg. He brushed a finger over the strap without meaning to and felt a pulse of anger he could use. He set the scope down, shouldered the dry bag, and met the dog's eyes. "Low tide," he said. "Quiet feet. Home by turn." Echo stood. Agreement. Low water peeled the marsh to bone. The flats shone like hammered bronze, cut by shallow veins that glimmered and then went dull. As clouds crossed the Sunday, Cole and Echo belly-crawled the last stretch to the culvert mouth, distributing weight the way muscle remembers. The mesh glistened with the same micaceous paste pearl flecks in gray slurry. He filmed up close, let the camera linger on the zip ties, new, black, not sun-chalked. Echo's nose traced a faint ribbon of darker mud. He sat silent signal, and Cole parted eelgrass to reveal neoprene-wrapped hose, half-buried, purring the smallest mechanical tremor. Cole followed the run with his fingertips. The hose arced toward the cannery. He tied thread-thin markers to shin-high reeds, colors nobody else would notice, breadcrumbs he could follow at night. Overhead, a gull dropped a crab. Shell shards tinked like broken glass. Echo didn't start. Neither did Cole. He backed out slow, filmed his watch face, the sun angle, the pool again from the porch time captured as a shape for anyone who doubted time existed here. Inside, he towel-dried Echo's paws, worked grit from between the toes where infection hides, and uploaded clips to a dead drop under a name he wouldn't say aloud. He added 3 sentences for Arya. Hose vibrating, mesh fizzing, line arcs toward cannery, noon turn. He changed water filters like Lenore had warned, topped off the generator oil, relabeled gas cans. Work steadied his hands. Echo paced, paused, listened toward the bay. The knock came polite at 1:30 politeness, like a coat over something else. A man in a fog-colored jacket introduced himself as Dane's Axiom Terra. He didn't step onto the porch. "Partnership," he said softly, producing a number that would rewire next month. "We clean. We restore. We do it together." "Oh, pilot programs that run at midnight?" Cole asked. "Off-peak windows. To minimize disruption," Cole said. "To whom?" Danes almost smiled. "You have a daughter. The math doesn't change if I sign." He closed the door gently. Echo leaned into his shin until his breath calmed. Arya called. "Biologist at the library. Hour from now. Bring a sample, but not the only one. We let him touch. We take it away." Cole poured a third of the jar into a second glass and labeled it with block letters. Echo watched like a scrub nurse. The lab wasn't a lab, only tables and one man with a field scope. Naved Klein. He cracked the lid, sniffed face pinched, then softened into curiosity. "This," he said, tilting to catch light. "Silver threads gathered, drifted, reformed. Looks alive, Filamentous bacteria in a mat. They bind metals. If someone's running solvent through that, they're pushing a system toward collapse or gaming a remediation. He studied the stills. Culvert, hose, barge with drum. Benzene, he murmured. If so, illegal near a marsh. If so, he wouldn't say the word criminal. He didn't need to. Cole felt it anyway. Back home, the wall became a mind he could read. GV14B scribbled in black marker. The bad scan memo avoid mechanical disturbance pinned beside a hose photo, so they argued on site. Mira's blue vein drawing at the node of his father's hand-drawn arrows. Echo sat and watched. Not guarding, not judging. Present. You look like a man arguing with wood, Guide Nash said, wiping hands on a rag as Cole ducked into the board shed's diesel smell. Cole slid stills across the workbench. Seen that barge? They anchor in the lee when the wind's east, Guide said. Hum like a refrigerator that forgot its job. He hefted a wax tin from a shelf. Inside. Field notes in a blockhand E. Rayner. Senior with arrows showing how to bleed water without killing what lives. Guide tapped across where 3 creeks met. Old sluice. Sticks like a mule. Needs 2 men or 1 man with sense and a rope that doesn't forgive. Why help me? 2 reasons, Guide said. I hate bullies, and I hate sad water. Cole folded the notes with reverence. I'll be careful. Be fast, Guide said. They won't wait for your caution. A county sedan idled by the pine when Cole returned. Lenore Keene held a clipboard under one arm and worry where no one trained her to display it. Safety check, she said. Storm season protocol. She walked through quietly, noted the stove, patched window, the clean dish rack, Mira's drawings. Echo stood for her hand and accepted a scratch on principle. Generator reliable? She asked. Most days. And during storms? We go inland. We have a plan. People there? I have a list. It sounded like a lie even when it wasn't. She tapped the filter housing. Change these more often. The bay's got moods. Then lower. Also, I hear the hum. A small confession she couldn't report. Her notice assessment scheduled fluttered on the door as she left. Paper had begun to multiply around him. Offers and orders, warnings and maps. By 22, clouds smudged the sky like erased chalk. Arya arrived with camera in clear plastic and a steadiness that made his skin quiet. The cannery's catwalks cut black shapes against slightly less black. From high and left, the barge looked installed rather than moored a heart where a factory's chest used to be. A man in rain gear tilted a drum over an intake hose. The label flashed MENE, then blurred in mist. The water ironed itself smooth, hoses down like tongues. A box truck idled in shadow, men ferrying loads as if logging overtime. On, Arya whispered. Camera 8 light. Down, Cole murmured. They flattened as a beam swept the catwalk and slid away, indifferent to iron versus breath. Echo lay loose, not meeting the light. A smaller motor coughed inland. The barge's green domes pulsed in sequence. 1, 2, 3. The hum rose a quarter tone, like a monitor sliding wrong. That was the turn in his bones. The goal flipped. No more stalling or dodging a sail. The work was to stop a machine from shredding a living filter. They withdrew in stages, slipped through reeds, and separated at the boardwalk. Dinner tomorrow, release together, Arya said. If I post early, they spike me. If you post alone, they isolate you. Together we're a 2-point triangulation. Lenore has Mira, he managed. She'll see it, Arya said. Make it worth the worry. The county sedan waited at the rise. Lenore rolled her window, the sliver admitting only her voice. Mira's teeth are fine. Don't make me lie to keep you out of a cell. I won't make you do anything, he said, hating the sentence he meant well. Don't make me not, she said. Morning spit out glossy posts. Restoring what matters, hard hats, light on clean water, a man who was not Cole with a dog wearing a branded bandana that was not Echo. Comments split and then slid toward him. Is this legal? My boy drinks this water. Arya texted, good, they're early. Publish at 1812. Send drone serial and any fiber evidence. Tactile wins. Cole pried up a floorboard to retrieve the drone battery and a printed serial photo. He macro-shot the tar-stained rope fiber he'd found under his coil. Poly divided by aramid jacket, heat scuffed. He labeled the bag. Guess now, prove later. At noon, Lenore. Mira asked if Echo is sad. He's mad, Cole said. Better than sad. She put a bird list on my fridge with so much tape. The tape is a message. He pictured it and steadied. At 2, Danes returned with a cameraman and a blue ribbon bundle. Injunction, the man with the phone read, filming. Cease interference. Surrender devices used for unlawful surveillance. I don't own a drone, Cole said. Found one that fell out of the sky. Weather's clumsy. We'll ask the court to hold you in contempt. If you'd like to tell a judge you poured benzene into a marsh, I'll bring popcorn. He set the paper under a pelican magnet. Echo set one paw on it, as if to keep it from flying away. At 1812, Arya texted. Now, Cole posted. Views ticked, then sprinted. A teacher tagged council members. Answer this. A father. Our kids drink this creek. Airboats growled far off. The barge's lights shifted to a pattern that felt like a stance. 2 deputies in Angular Badge rolled down the ruts. Lenore again. We need to talk, Angular Badge said. Physics, Cole said. Let me open the old sluice so pressure has somewhere to go. If you arrest me now, you own the flood. We can't authorize, he began. It predates your badge, Guide said, materializing with a coil of rope and the unhurried stare of someone who only learned patience by needing it. And it saves birds. Lenore's jaw worked. If he opens the wheel and something breaks, the county owns it. If he doesn't, and they purge into a closed system, we own hospital bills. Choose the liability you can live with. She looked at Cole. You know it sticks. I have a rope that doesn't, he said. Go, she said. I never said that. They trotted through reeds in a half-crouch. Echo ferried the rope across the narrow beam, chest under the line, precise as a diagram. The wheel wore salt and years. Cole rapped, set, and pulled in pulses per his father's note. The gate resisted like an animal pretending to be metal. It gave a half-inch, then more. The creek's voice dropped to a lower register. Hunger in it, but not violence. Angular Badge breathed the word not for reports. Guide grinned without teeth. Old doors, he said. Worth oiling. They tied off and jogged back. Arya met them at the boardwalk, live stream ticking past 10,000. Not pretty, she said. True. Good, he said. Lenore handed him a folded paper, his note to Mira. She wanted you to have it now. He put it in his chest pocket, felt it like armor. Midnight finally arrived. It felt heavier for having been promised all day. The house smelled like lamp oil and wet rope. Echo lay with his chin on Cole's boot, eyes slitting at every new sound, then closing again with trust. The scanner murmured county traffic. Monitor. Perimeter. Civilian presence. The hum outside slipped higher, like a string tuned wrong. Cole's hands remembered another night mud brick room, children lifted to a table, the water whispering up walls, the order to withdraw, the lie, I will come back. He had obeyed and failed. The room still visited when he washed dishes. Tonight, he had turned a wheel. Not redemption. Correction. He wrote a note to Mira he'd meant for years. I opened a door Granddad drew. We'll oil it together. I love you like water loves gravity. Everywhere. Always. He set it under the pelican magnet and laughed once at himself, quietly, because emotion embarrasses and saves in equal measure. Echo stood, stared at the window. The hum faltered, surged, then steadied. Cole grabbed the headlamp and rope and walked back to the gate to give the wheel one more quarter turn. Water answered, currents speaking a language that sounds like arithmetic if you pretend not to understand it. He sat on the slab with Echo's head on his thigh. They listened. The hum slid down. He slept without moving, eyes open. Fog lowered the ceiling to 20 yards. Arya. Over 100,000. State wants raw. They didn't sound mad. They sounded awake. Naved and I will scope at the culvert. You okay? Enough, he texted. Guide arrived with biscuits. Eat, he said. Town's ready to row spoons to that barge. I hid the spoons. At the culvert, Naved took a core. The tube fizzed at the edges. He slid a smear onto his portable scope and turned the screen toward Arya's lens. Silver snow drifted upward through black jelly. This is a living consortium, he said. Filamentous bacteria binding ions. Disturbance by solvent, heat, or pressure will crash it. GV14b wasn't a label for storage. It was a warning. If benzene is present, illegal, Arya said. Naved switched to caution, but the word had escaped. Deputies hovered like punctuation the sentence hadn't decided on. Angular Badge arrived, eyes on Nave's badge, on the camera. Authority? He asked. State, Nave said, calling someone and handing the phone to Angular Badge. The man listened, nodded, then told his deputies, "Shut the pumps down." Axiom's crew hesitated. Danes appeared with a permit that did not exist in paper. "We're in compliance," he said smoothly. "Not anymore," said a woman in a navy blazer stepping from a state sedan. "Deputy Director Corson, this area is under emergency designation as a sensitive site. All commercial activity ceases pending assessment." Hezid, no. Engines fell silent like animals allowed to sleep. The hum died without tapering. The marsh filled the gap with its old orchestra crabs ticking, reeds whispering, an angry gull. Echo sneezed and leaned his full weight on Cole's leg. Cole touched his forehead to the dog's and let himself breathe through his nose once, a cautious luxury. Lenore's car arrived. "Mira watched the live feed," she said, hair escaping pins. "She's proud. Don't make me tell her a different story tomorrow." "I won't," he said. They weren't done. Danes promised appeals. PR handles cratered. A lawyer with a triangular tie handed angular badge 15 clipped pages and got a shrug. Arya directed volunteers like a conductor. Photos from the 90 seconds, old overflow shots, aunties with boxes of Polaroids. The feed turned from outrage to archives. Cole did tasks that kept sanity shaped, tightened a hinge, mended a rail where his screw had stripped, oiled the gate wheel between pulses. Work quieted the brain's more elaborate betrayals. When he was 10, his father had stood with him at this same sluice after a storm. The old man had scratched at rust with a pocket knife and said, "Water wants easy. Give it a door that doesn't kill the kitchen." Cole hadn't understood. He did now. The wheel obeyed patience, not power. Rag, oil, quarter turns. Listen. That night, the barge cut its lights and tried the hum again. It stuttered, rose, fell, then sulked. Cole lay awake and counted breaths to match the creek's new song. Echo patrolled, stopped by Mira's blanket, returned to the window. At 3:17, a whine, the hum sharpening into sawtooth. A crane arm unfurled in fog. Another hose dropped. Not to the usual place. Toward the town creek? "No," he said aloud, already moving. Echo ran faster. At the creek mouth, the paste bloomed like frost in a circle where a circle didn't belong. He filmed, spoke the time and date. A shallow V, fresh from a skiff's nose, cut the mud. He pressed 2 fingers into the cut and lifted grit slicked with tar, bagged it, labeled it. Echo froze. Nose forward point. In reeds, a black square. A motion-activated trail cam lensed toward the boardwalk. He snapped a photo of it in place, cut the ties, killed the battery, found a second, and did the same. If someone wanted footage to frame him, they wouldn't get tonight's. Found trail cams. New paste at Town Creek. "Wheel open," he texted Arya. "Stand by. State en route," she wrote. He didn't stand. He went to the gate, an oiled motion like faith. Echo drank at the cleanest edge, tongue ticking. Cole listened to that sound for 3 breaths and stored it. A navy blazer reappeared at 9, Corson with papers in a clear sleeve. "Designation confirmed. All operations halt pending review," she said. The deputies visibly enjoyed having verbs that weren't observed. Engines stopped. The hum died again. People listened to the absence like a choir holding rest. Danes arrived with 2 suited men. Terms and threats. "We'll appeal," he said. "We'll litigate. We'll reposition." "Do that," Corson said. "Not here." Angular Badge turned to Cole, and without turning his head, softened his voice. "You did the right wrong thing," he said. "Now don't do any more wrong right things." "I plan to do correct things," Cole said, and Guide made a small sound that might have been a laugh. Lenore handed him his first note back. "She said you'll need it later," she said. He tucked it next to his heart. By afternoon, Axiom's glossy accounts pivoted. Partnering with veterans became protecting communities. A photo of a folded flag appeared under a caption that didn't belong beside pumps. The comments turned feral, then focused. Teachers, fishermen, nurses. A pastor with a voice that carried wrote, "We don't trade water for checks." Arya edited in the truck with the window down. She cut one sequence that showed Echo ferrying rope across the beam and the gate wheel turning a 1/4 inch at a time. She laid Nave's microbes shimmering like a galaxy next to the pour. She refused music. "The bay scored itself," she said. The county left 1 car at the rise and a boat hidden in reeds. Enough to answer, not enough to start a fight. Nave took his cores to a lab that was actually a lab. Corson drove back to the Capitol with a face that looked like road. Cole stood on the porch under a sky that wanted to heal and wasn't sure how. The marsh sounded like ordinary weather for the first time in days. He pinned Corson's notice beside his father's map and Mira's blue veins, beside the memo from '87 and the drone serial and the tar thread, beside the printed still of the drum. The collage looked like a family portrait drawn by a place that had finally found a pen. Echo drifted to the doorway and lay across the threshold, choosing both inside and out. Guide brought stew. Tomorrow they'll try a bigger check or a thicker stack of paper, he said. You say no to both. We stack cash offers into firewood and paper into stool legs. Stools wobble, Cole said without smiling. Not when you cut them right, Guide said. Old men know chairs. Night slid down, more curtain than weight. Cole oiled the wheel at pulses, counted breaths with the creak, and sat with Echo on the step until stars appeared like pinholes punched by something patient. He slept a little. Enough. He woke to 3 green lights aligning on the bay, then dimming in unison, like a creature testing its heartbeat and deciding, for now, to rest. Cole picked up the old rope, slung it over his shoulder, and looked at Echo. Come on, partner, he said. The dog rose like an answer. They stepped into the damp pre-dawn as the marsh held its breath and then, slowly, let it go. The first siren came from the bay, not the road. A keening wail that didn't belong to law enforcement. It was the emergency cutoff alarm from the Axiom barge, the sound of a machine realizing too late it had made a mistake. Cole was already on the porch when the green lights flashed again across the fog. This time, they weren't steady. They blinked, erratic, desperate. Echo growled once, low, almost questioning. Cole grabbed the dry bag and the headlamp. We finish it, he said. By the time he reached the boardwalk, the marsh was no longer breathing in rhythm. The hum, once steady, now fractured, pitched up into a scream that shivered through the pilings. The water at the culvert mouth was alive again, not smooth but boiling, frothing silver white with chemical foam. From the cannery direction, he saw shapes moving, workers or contractors, running silhouettes against floodlights. The tide was coming fast, wrong fast. It should have had another 20 minutes, but the storm upstream had dumped early runoff, and with the culvert blocked halfway from last night's spill, the water had nowhere to go except up. Echo barked once, short and sharp, then bolted down the narrow plank toward the gate. Cole followed, lungs burning. The night's quiet dissolved into the chaos of water striking wood. At the sluice, the wheel rattled in its socket, vibrating with pressure. He laid a hand on the rim, heat bled through the metal. Not good, he muttered. The gate wasn't stuck this time. It was being forced shut by the pressure behind it. He wrapped the rope again, fed it around the spoke, and leaned into the pull. The wheel resisted, then jerked. The noise that followed wasn't mechanical. It was something older, the creek's voice cracking under strain. Hold, damn you, he said between clenched teeth. Echo braced behind him, paws sliding on wet plank, chest low. Together they pulled man and dog, rope and wheel, time and tide. Then it gave. The gate flung open with a shudder that slammed Cole to his knees, and water roared through like a throat cleared by the earth itself. The flood found its mouth again, tearing through silt and old reeds, carrying with it the glowing paste and whatever Axiom had pumped into the bay. He almost smiled, but then he saw the foam was still rising. The barge, now unmoored, was drifting sideways into the channel, the hoses snapping from their fittings one by one. A red light blinked on its deck, not alarm, not warning ignition. One of the drums must have ruptured. Solvent vapor, mixing with a running generator. Echo! He shouted. They ran. Water chased their boots across the boardwalk as the barge's hum warped into a growl of engines feeding fire. Cole shoved Echo ahead, up the last steps of the stilt house, just as light ripped across the marsh. The explosion didn't come as a boom but as a pressure wave, a monstrous exhale that flattened grass and rattled every window for a mile. The green domes lifted, tore apart, and fell in molten arcs into the bay. Then the fire went out as quickly as it came, smothered by its own floodwater. Silence, the kind that hums in the bones. Cole staggered upright. The water line glowed faintly where the bacteria shimmered, not dying, adapting. He could see the creek reclaiming itself, washing the toxins outward, back toward the mouth where it could disperse. He'd bought it a chance. That was enough. Headlights cut through fog an hour later. County trucks. The sheriff's boat nosed into the channel, followed by a state environmental unit. Corson's sedan came last, tires whispering on the gravel as if afraid to disturb what was left of the quiet. She stepped out, raincoat collar up, eyes scanning the bay that still steamed faintly under dawn's first color. "You still standing?" she said. "Not a question." "Mostly," Cole said. "Gates open. The Marsh can breathe again." She nodded slowly. "We'll need your statement. And your footage." He handed over the SD card, the one Arya had insisted he keep separate from the uploads. "Everything's here. Before, during, after. Danes' men, the poor, the barge." Corson tucked it into her jacket pocket. "We'll take it from here, Mr. Rayner." He almost laughed. "Nobody ever really takes it from here. The Marsh just loans it out." Arya arrived mid-morning with coffee and a camera still crusted in dried salt. Her face was pale, but her voice carried relief. "They're calling it a containment breach. Preliminary report says the microbes absorbed most of the spill. Klein's already writing his paper." "Heroic microbes," Cole said dryly. "Maybe they'll get a medal." Arya sat on the porch rail, looking out at the water. The story's everywhere. State investigation. Axiom shares in freefall. They'll spin it, but they can't erase what's filmed. "You going to keep digging?" he asked. She smiled tiredly. "You think I know how to stop?" Echo nosed her hand, and for the first time since she'd met him, the old dog wagged his tail. It made her laugh, a small, cracked sound, but real. "What about you?" she asked. Cole looked at the wheel glinting in the sunlight, at the reopened creek curling through the marsh like a healed scar. "I'll stay. Someone needs to keep the door oiled." Arya nodded, took a sip of coffee, then raised her phone and snapped a picture of him and Echo against the bay. "For the record," she said. "So the next time someone asks what saving a place looks like, I can show them." 2 days later, Lenore drove up with Mira. The girl ran from the car before it stopped, bare feet slapping against the planks, arms wide. "Daddy." Cole caught her and lifted her clear off the ground. For the first time in weeks, his breath didn't catch halfway up his throat. Echo circled them, barking once, then settling against Mira's legs as if confirming his own inspection report. Lenore watched from the porch steps. "You're on the news, you know. They called you a concerned veteran acting in defense of public land." He shook his head. "That's too many syllables for what I did." "It's what they needed to print," she said. Then softer, "You did right, Cole. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He studied her face, lined with exhaustion, with duty, with something close to affection buried under it all. "You keeping the badge?" "For now," she said. "But I'll be damned if I hand water quality reports to anyone wearing an Axiom pin again." Mira tugged his sleeve. "Can we go see the wheel?" "Auntie said you and Echo fixed the tide." He smiled. "We didn't fix it. We just reminded it how to move." That night, after they left, he walked back to the gate alone. The moon rode high and pale. He could see where the water had torn a new groove through the mud, and how the bacterial shimmer the silver thread was slowly dulling to brown, folding itself back into the natural sediment. He crouched, touched the water, and felt no hum now, only heartbeat. Memory opened like a film reel. The dam in another country, the room he'd left, the sound of rushing he could never outshout. But over it now came the image of this creek exhaling, of Echo's weight against his leg, of Mira's laughter echoing across the marsh. He whispered into the tide, "I came back." The wind moved across the reeds like a reply. By week's end, the marsh had begun to heal. Birds returned, first white egrets stalking between green shoots, and herons tracing lazy arcs. The smell of solvent had faded, replaced by brine and life. Gede came by one evening with beer and the kind of grin that hides respect. "They're talking about naming the site after your father," he said. "Reiner Gate." "Too much fuss," Cole said. "He just built a door." "And you kept it open," Guide said. "That counts." "Aye." Echo lay nearby, chin on paws, one ear toward them, one toward the creek. The old dog's muzzle was gray now, but his eyes tracked every shift in the water as if guarding something sacred. "You ever think about leaving?" Guide asked. Cole shook his head. "Not anymore. This is home, the kind you earn." Guide nodded, finishing his beer. "Well, if the tide keeps its manners, I'll see you at dawn." "Bring the rope," Cole said. "Always do," Gede replied, and wandered into the dusk. When night fell, Cole took out the letter Mira had written at Lenore's house. She'd scrawled the names of birds she wanted to see, spoonbill, osprey, sandpiper, and underlined kingfisher twice. Beneath it, in her crooked handwriting, "Tell the water thank you." He pinned it beside his father's map, next to the state's cease order, and the faded memo from 1987. The wall now looked less like evidence and more like history, the kind that could be inherited. He poured a cup of water from the tap and drank. It tasted like itself. Clean, cold, honest. Echo stretched, sighed, and pressed his muzzle to Cole's knee. "Yeah," Cole said, "we're done for now." But he knew better. The marsh would always need a keeper, someone to listen when it started humming again. He leaned back in the chair his father had built and listened to the rhythm of water through the open gate, steady, unhurried, alive. Weeks later, a letter arrived with an official seal. Corson's handwriting on the envelope, not typed. Inside, a short note. State confirms natural microbial remediation at Site GV-14B. You prevented a contamination event that could have reached 3 counties. There will be hearings. There will also be funding. If you'd like a role in oversight, the department could use a man who knows when to open a door and when to hold one shut. He folded it carefully and set it beneath Mira's bird list. "Maybe later," he murmured. "First, I need a season of quiet." Outside, a breeze crossed the marsh, carrying a faint murmur, not mechanical this time, but natural, deep, content. The hum was back, but now it sounded like breathing. Cole stepped out, letting the wind lift his hair. Echo padded beside him. Together they walked down the plank path toward the gate, where sunlight touched water in bands of gold and silver. He rested his hand on the wheel, feeling it warm beneath his palm. It no longer trembled. It turned smooth, obedient, ready. "Let's keep it this way," he said. Echo barked once, sharp and sure, and sat facing the horizon where the marsh met the sea. The tide turned, slow and easy, and for the first time in years, Cole didn't brace for it. He simply watched it come. The marsh no longer hummed with threat. It breathed. Wind combed the reeds, and what used to sound like warning now sounded like music written in water. Cole sat on the porch rail with a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. Echo sprawled at his feet, muzzle flecked with white salt. The old dog's chest rose and fell with the rhythm of the tide. For the first time in years, Cole didn't listen for the wrong kind of silence. He let the right kind of quiet stay. He'd thought redemption would come as applause, as a courtroom verdict, as a story with a clean ending. It didn't. It came as stillness, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything. When he turned the wheel that night, he hadn't saved a county or even a creek. He'd saved the one thing he could still believe in. The idea that broken systems, like broken men, can heal if you let what's natural flow again. Mira's bird list hung above the table, edges curled by humidity. Every name was a promise. Osprey, heron, kingfisher. Yesterday morning, they'd seen the first return a spoonbill flashing pink against dawnlight. She'd pointed, laughing, and Cole had felt something loosen inside him that years of duty and guilt had tightened shut. He didn't tell her it was a miracle. He told her it was patience, finally rewarded. A letter from Corson lay open beside the mug, asking again if he'd serve as advisor for the state's remediation task force. He hadn't answered. Maybe he would, later. For now, his job was here keeping the gate oiled, keeping the stories straight, teaching Mira which doors to open and which ones to leave shut. He looked down at Echo. "You hear that?" he said softly. The dog's tail thumped once. Out across the marsh, the water rippled a slow, low pulse like the earth breathing through a half-healed scar. Cole smiled. That's what peace sounds like when it's earned. He rose, walking the short path to the gate. The metal wheel gleamed in the sun, smooth from months of use. He laid his hand on it, not to test, but to thank. His father's initials were still etched faintly on the rim, ER, a quiet signature of intention. Cole traced them with his thumb. "Doors aren't built to stay open forever," his father used to say. "They're built to be opened when it matters." He understood that now. War had taught him how to close doors. The marsh had taught him how to open them again. He turned back toward the house, where Mira's laughter carried across the water, bright and small and endless. Echo trotted ahead, ears pricked, tail a metronome marking a rhythm that felt like belonging. The tide was turning slow, inevitable, gentle, and for once, Cole didn't brace against it. He just stood there, breathing in the salt and wind and life, knowing that sometimes redemption doesn't roar or shine. Sometimes it just rises quietly, like the sea returning home.